Welcome to Transcendent. I'm Raya, and I'm the daughter.
And I'm Joe, and I'm the dad. You realize Halloween is almost here?
Tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. Tomorrow is Halloween. However, I liked looking forward to Halloween when you and your sister were young because they'd bring home the candy and I could eat it.
I have done some of the same with our kids as well.
But you know what I liked the best about it? The stuff you liked, I didn't really care for, and some of the stuff you didn't like, I liked. So it kind of worked out. Although now that we don't have any kids at home, and I don't even hang out with the grandkids when they're going out Halloweening. In fact, they're too old for that now. So I kind of miss a little bit of that. I guess the only thing we do, we live in a neighborhood that right behind us will have about 400 kids. But on our side, last year, I think we had 2 people that came to our door. And of course, your mother bought enough candy for maybe 10, which means I ate 80% of it.
8 kids worth of candy.
Yeah, right.
Well, that's great. We've got some candy coming up for you, proverbially,
That's
after this.
sweet.
As you know, when I was first wrestling with my own issues, I found an obscure little social media site that I could go and kind of talk through my own issues, my gender issues that I was dealing with. And I've continued on at that same place and continued to talk through some of my things that I'm dealing with right now. And I was approached about a week or two ago by a man that we got to talking, and he said, I have a similar situation to you. I wanted to read some of our conversation, and I thought we would talk about it here.
So when you say you were talking this over, you were actually corresponding
It was
back and forth.
yes, it was all. This is all text. We've never spoken with one another.
Mm-hmm.
After we chatted a little bit, I told him about our podcast, and I said, this seems like a really interesting conversation. It's a difficult situation that he's going through here, very similar to kind of what I went through many years ago when I was first dealing with my gender issues. Here's some of what he says. He first approached me and said, I have similar issues to what you've been through. I'm married to a woman, but I'm attracted to men. Trying to ignore my true feelings just doesn't work anymore, and I'm tired of hiding who I really am. I'm a lot older than you, which he's not that much older than me, but he is a little bit. He says, I have a good life otherwise, but I'm not totally unhappy, but I was never able to live my true self. I've been hiding my attraction to men. I can't talk to my wife about it. It would be immediate divorce. I have children and grandchildren. She would immediately feel betrayed, and I wouldn't blame her. I should have been honest with her from the beginning. I was wrong to think that the marriage would cure me. And then I asked him, does she know what you're going through? He said, I don't think she knows. She did ask a time or two when we were first married if I was gay. I must have been throwing some signals, I guess. Years ago, she saw something I left open online. We discussed it. She was angry. It took a lot of time, but she seems to have forgotten about it. I'm sure it crosses her mind once in a while. I guess she appreciated what a good father I was to the kids, which went a long way. And I asked a little bit, how does she feel about everything? And, in general, how does she feel towards LGBTQ issues? He said she's pretty old school. She may be open if I ever talk to her, but that would be the end of our emotional relationship forever. So on a one-on-one level, she's kind and considerate to any LGBTQ person she encounters. We have friends and family who have LGBTQ children, and she's kind. But she believes in her heart of hearts that men should love women and women should love men. I desire time with a man, the touch of a man. Until now, I'd look at a man and quickly turn away. But now I look and appreciate. I do find women attractive, though, but not quite as much as I used to. Very confusing, to say the least. I tried so many times to turn it off. I used to feel ashamed, but I don't anymore. I just embrace it, and I'm much happier. So, my only choice is to cheat, which I don't want to do, or continue to deny my feelings. In either way, not great. But talking through it with you and others really helps. And this is the point where I said, boy, this is a difficult situation, what you're going through. Would you mind if we talked about this on our podcast? And he said, that would be great. And then he played a few of our podcasts, and he's really excited about this.
Well, some of the things that are coming in here seem disconnected to me. I think, first of all, they apparently have been married for a long time. I mean, he's talking about grandchildren, so we clearly know that he's a generation older than that he has grandchildren already, and I don't know how many, and he has kids. And
he's not retirement age, but he's coming up on retirement age in a few years.
Okay, then that gives us kind of an idea. I can tell you from my own experience that what I thought about a variety of things in my life when I was first married are a lot different than what I think about them today. And I get the impression he feels he can't speak to his wife because she'll immediately close the door and everything will end for him. I'm not sure that's true. People mellow a lot more as they get older. Now, I'm not sure it isn't. I'm not suggesting anything here. I'm just giving you some thoughts that maybe what he thinks is true isn't true. Maybe if he actually told her what he thought, the way he communicated that to you, there might be more support there than you think. Now, I don't know this person or anything about her, and that's a little bit of a risk. But I can tell you, since we've been doing this podcast, I know I've heard from quite a few people who said when they came out, they were expecting that they were going to be completely rejected by a variety of people, and others were going to be very accepting. And in many cases, that was not the case at all. Some of the people they thought were not going to be accepting at all were. And were very accepting and just joined in. Others that they thought were going to embrace it became kind of standoffish. So we don't really know where she is what I think. How do you find that out? Boy, I don't have an answer to that. I've got some thoughts, but I don't have an answer.
And it's a really good point what you bring up here. There is a phenomenon that I have seen that I'm going to term the weight of the closet. When you're stuck in the closet, it can feel like, oh, this is so, I don't know what I'm going to do, and I can't come out because of this reason or that reason. And you're right, when you do come out, now not all the time, and that's the hard thing. You never know what you're going to get. But that means you don't know what you're going to get positive, but you also don't know what you're going to get negative.
Right.
You don't know for sure that it's going to be negative. And oftentimes you find, and the biggest thing that surprised me is when I came out, what I did not expect was that weight, how much that weight was lifted all of a sudden. I thought I would be really embarrassed I remember when my ex-wife brought you and Mom over and didn't tell me at all beforehand that we were going to have this conversation, didn't tell you either.
No, I had no idea.
I knew that my mom knew, but you didn't know, and I didn't know we were going to have that conversation. And I thought it was going to be really scary. But what I discovered was, as we were having it, the weight of it not having to hide anymore, of being able to say, guys, this is what I'm really struggling with, was so freeing.
What kind of a reaction did you expect from me? What did you really think might happen if this happened?
Well, I didn't have time to think through, well, how is this going to go and what am I going to think?
No, right.
But because I'm kind of glad that it happened, it just kind of came out that way. But When I was seeing my therapist at the time, I remember having a conversation with her specifically saying the people that I'm most worried about are my mom and dad. I'm going to feel really embarrassed to be around them. If I do transition, they're going to be the people that I'm going to be most embarrassed to be around. And it turns out not only was I a little bit wrong about that, I was 180 degrees wrong about that. You guys are the guys, are the people that I'm around the most often now, and you're the most accepting of any. I get the most support from you of anyone that I have in my life at all.
Thank you.
And now, of course, that's a whole different situation, but it's just to illustrate that what you think is going to be and what it actually is completely different.
So this guy might find out that his wife is more accepting than he thought. On the other hand, she might go ballistic.
When I first came out to my ex wife, I first had a conversation, and you and I have talked about this a little bit before on this podcast,
Yes.
that I call meta communication. We talked about how to talk about issues because I was really scared about how this is going to go. And so I said to her, and actually I did this with some of the kids as well. I said, "Hey, I've got something I really want to talk to you about, and it's going to be a hard conversation for me. I don't know how it's going to go. I'm really worried about it, and it's something I can't not talk to you about it, but I'm also really worried about how it's going to go. Can I at least have your promise that you're not going to blow up at me and that you're going to hear me out or, something like that?" And I remember when I talked to my oldest daughter beforehand, I remember this well. She doesn't remember it at all because to me it was a really emotional conversation. And to her it was, "Oh, well, I'm just having a conversation with my dad." It wasn't, she didn't file it away, but I remember sitting her down and saying, I was crying and I said, "I'm really having a tough time. I'm really wrestling with some issues here. And I'm afraid that when it comes out about the stuff I'm dealing with, that you're going to have a hard time accepting me." And she said, I could never reject you. And she gave me a big hug. And she's, so I got her buy-in beforehand. And it was a few months later. And it was still hard for her, but she knew that she had said in her heart, this is an important relationship for me. And so we did eventually make sure that we brought it around.
Actually, you can hear that podcast. It was from April 17, 2023. It's called When Dad Transitions with guest Megan Jones.
So that was a really, really important conversation that I had. I remember that very deeply. So I think having a conversation about the conversation that you want to have is always valuable so that they can treat the conversation charitably instead of just reacting.
Right. But you didn't do that with me.
I didn't know that if I had been preparing for it, we would have.
Uh-huh.
But I didn't know to prepare for it. But by the time I had the conversation with you, it was so weighing on me that while it was a surprise to me, it was also it was hard at the beginning. It felt embarrassing. I needed a little bit of a push towards it. But once we started the conversation, it just came all tumbling out and I couldn't contain it at all.
When he mentioned that she had some suspicions and asked him whether or not he was gay, I don't know just exactly how she would have reacted if he would have said yes. And neither does he. But he thought I think he said something to you about if she would have exploded if that would have happened or something like that. But that's an assumption. It's not necessarily a fact. This might be a much easier situation than he thinks, especially if he says, as he referred to us earlier, I could cheat, but I don't want to do that. And if he hasn't done anything like that and he tells her, I don't want to do that, it might go better than he thinks.
I think when you come into it with the assumption that if I ever told the truth, it would be done, that makes it really scary to ever share the truth. But you're right, you don't know that.
No. Believe me, I am not a psychiatrist or a psychologist or anything else. However, I think it would be a good thing for him to look into some counseling. You did that.
I did, and I mentioned that earlier. That therapist was really helpful for me getting through some difficult roadblocks that I couldn't get past. And what I discovered is a lot of times she would oftentimes point out specific choices of language that I would use. I would say, I shouldn't do X and Y, or, oh, I know I should do such and such, but I can't. And she would say, wait a minute, you just use that word should or shouldn't. Where does that word come from? Should why? Who says should? Who says shouldn't? And she would test some of the assumptions that I was bringing that I thought must be true.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized as she pushed back a little bit, some of my shoulds were not right. Some of my shoulds were things that I was bringing, I was imposing my own thoughts on the situation that ended up really not being true.
And I think we do that a lot, not just in this situation, but in many situations. I can remember when I first started my business, and I had a friend who worked for me actually. We were preparing to go to a show, and he wanted to do something, and I said, no, that's going to be too expensive. We can't do that. And he kept using one of our advertisers that was advertising with us and used his name. And he said, what is Charlie going to think? What do you think he's going to say? You know what he's going to say? He's going to say X and Y and Z. Well, we went through it without whatever he was talking about. That would have been very costly for us, money we didn't have. It never came up. It never came up. But he believed it. He could see in his own mind. What do you think he's going to say?
I remember you telling me that story
Yeah.
when we were working together, because I would everyone does that. It's not just me. I mean, everyone will do this, that you're anticipating what people will do. And there were a lot of times where I would say, I really think they're going to do such and such. And you would say, we don't know that. And we would do something different. And that's never what they said.
Exactly.
What you anticipate is never how it's going to go.
I can also remember whenever I went into a non-client that we were trying to get, whoever I had coming with me, whether it was the salesperson or whether it was you, I would always say just before we walked in the door, now remember, we've got nothing to lose here. They're not our client now. We've got nothing to lose. Let's go for this. Don't worry and don't imagine something that you think is going to happen when it won't. And it was always the case.
Now, of course, in this situation, there is something to lose. But don't let the fear of losing something keep you from having the conversations that really need to be had. It is very rarely the case where keeping the truth away from somebody is helpful. Generally, no, there are exceptions. There's always exceptions to every rule. But in general, when you're trying to keep secrets, it's never good for a relationship.
The other thing is, when you are thinking about this, when you are trying to decide what you're going to do, you conjure up these things. And how are you going to get some answers from this? And how are you going to find out what reality should be? I'll suggest that one of the things he should do is see if he can find a group somewhere that he could join, a group that is a support group of some kind. The one I know that I would recommend is an organization called PFLAG. And I don't know where he lives, but there is a PFLAG within 100 miles of him, I'll tell you that. A PFLAG group, if you look for that, you may find exactly what you're looking for.
And that is Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, PFLAG.
So all you need to do is Google that, find out when and where they meet, and it is totally confidential. That there might find some very good help there.
And there may be other resources. Some cities will have LGBTQ centers. There'll be other resources. If you just do a quick Google search in your area, you will find some resources and some people that can be a support. You can also do, as he's already taken the first step, go and find an online community. So we've already connected. That was the very first step. And he's already said just taking that first step really helped a lot.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can tell you, you've heard us say this on the podcast many times. If you know one gay person, you just know one gay person. Everybody's different. If you know one transgender person, you know one transgender person. That's it. You can't assume their situation is going to be like your situation. Each is unique. So nobody knows exactly how it will play out. But you can get feedback from more than one person, 3, 4, 5, whatever connections you have, and begin to build a picture yourself of your likely reality rather than your perceived reality.
And that's so important. It's so easy to come in thinking this is how it's going to be, and just having those assumptions challenged. When I first was wrestling with being transgender, I read a memoir, and that was really the place where I said, boy, there's a lot where she's like me. Although the reality is that she was about half like me. But the half that was like me was really like me.
Mm-hmm.
And the other half that was not like me, I just said, yeah, that's not my situation at all. I don't know anything like that.
But I read that book as well because you gave it to me. And it didn't turn out like your situation did. He stayed with his wife after that for some time. They ultimately got a divorce after she came out. And that's so it didn't last. That was part of the fear. It didn't last.
But when they came to that decision, they came to it together.
Correct.
And it was the right decision for them, for where they were at. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the important thing.
And they still remain friends.
And that's actually the same with me, is that my ex and I have remained friends. We are, in fact, we had a situation, just to give an idea of how close we have remained. I haven't told you this yet. She's actually started recently just seeing a guy.
She told me last night.
She was worried about how the kids would respond. So what she did is she waited until the kids were all over at my house, at my new house. And then she came over and, oh, hey, I just wanted to come over and say everything. And then she said, can I talk to you for a second? We went off in the other room and she told me a little bit. And she said, so I'm going to tell the kids and I really would like your support. Sure. No problem. So we all came out and she told them, and 2 of the kids, oh, and I said, well, so, I want you guys to know I'm really happy for your mom. And I think that this is going to be a really good thing. This guy I haven't met him yet, but he sounds like he's a good guy. And the kids, it was really great that we had a united front together. We have a good friendship, and that will always be the case.
And last night when she stopped over, that's the same thing I told her. I'm very happy for her. And I was sincere. I am. I'm very happy. That's wonderful.
And she still comes to our holiday dinners and everything. She is a part of the family. I call her my sister-in-law.
Yes.
When I'm in situations where I don't want to try to explain, because she's part of the family. He said, I may be open if I ever talk to her, but that would be the end of our emotional relationship forever.
I don't know what that means.
I think it's a concern that it's going to violate something in the relationship so deeply that they could never come back. And again, this is me reading into this, but almost as if it was cheating, that when it comes out, it's going to be so devastating and she's going to feel so betrayed, not because of something that he did, but because of who he is. And that's why he wants to keep it hidden, because he doesn't want her to feel betrayed.
Well, it sounds like they've been married for many years. I'm going to suggest 30 or more. Probably.
I'm
I
sure.
mean, with grandchildren and all. And it might be even more than that, but let's say it's 30 or more years. And I will tell you, I'll repeat what I said earlier, that people mellow as they age, generally. Some people don't, but as he said he's generally happy. Well, he's generally happy. If he's not generally happy, he certainly wouldn't be having a happy married life. And to say that he's generally happy means he probably is comfortable with the life he has right now. That's my thought about it. How will this change it? It's possible. It could actually make the relationship stronger because they're sharing honesty with one another.
One thing I know is that the year before I transitioned, we had the deepest intimacy in my marriage that we've ever had.
Hmm.
Now, ultimately, the weight of me being transgender, she didn't marry a woman, and so that was not going to continue on.
Mm-hmm.
But during that year, it was a time where all of a sudden we were completely open and exposed with one another. There were no more secrets. And that brought such a tremendous sense of intimacy in a way that I never expected that we were going to have. I can say with pretty good certainty that if you're having a relationship like this where you've kept this secret so long, she might not know what the secret is, but she knows there's something going on there.
I think that's true too.
And you both developed a sense of, this is how things are, and we're not going to dredge things up. But you may discover you took a wrong turn a long time ago. And by coming back and revisiting that, you have something entirely different now.
I wonder whether this is a total secret that no one knows or whether there is someone out there, a friend of his, that does know. Or maybe one of the children that does know. Who knows? He knows who's out there with that. Is there somebody out there that could, when you're having that tough conversation, somebody you both trust that could be kind of a mediator in the situation? After when I found out about you, it was because your wife and your mother and I were all there. I was the only one that didn't know.
Well, and at that point, I had actually not talked to my mom about it, other than she may have said, Diana came and talked to me, but we didn't talk
Yeah.
about it. I don't remember if we had a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but I know we didn't have a conversation about it. So when I first came out to you was really the first time that I was sharing how I felt with her too. So in a sense, while I wasn't coming out to her, I was really.
You might be a person out there right now that is struggling with an issue and trying to decide how are you going to come out to someone that you think it might destroy the relationship. If there's anything that you heard in this podcast that you think might be helpful to you, great. For those who don't know and aren't sure where to go and what to do, I would definitely recommend finding a PFLAG group. That in itself will give you some direction, some hope, some help, some suggestions that might give you an opportunity to look at it from a different perspective.
There's a lot out there, and we're grateful to have you coming and listening to the podcast here each week as well, where we try to be your voice of positivity, that we're trying to be part of that support network as well by talking through some of these issues. We maybe don't have the answers, but there might not be a right answer. But having that support is really, really important. So we're so grateful to have you joining us every week. We're glad to have you here right now. This friend that we're talking about always reminds me, when you look at the glass, look at it as half full.
If you enjoyed this podcast, send us a picture of yourself in your Halloween costume. Trick or treat. See you next Monday.